This is the 100th episode of Potential Reality. So far, we have walked among the intellectual immortals of ancient Alexandria. This was among those whose primary goal was to know everything, and inspired by this, they made more fundamental discoveries than at any time in history. Other episodes took us to the kingdom of Mali, the legendary land of gold, unequaled wealth, and an intellectual world capital where it was said the royal palace was encased in gold. Our visit to the Haight District witnessed the forming of the hippie movement in San Francisco, a time of creativity that was profound and unique in history. We stopped by for a glance at the Roaring Twenties, the Age of Enlightenment. We looked in on the beatniks and other eras. There was adventuring with 19th century British explorer Richard F. Burton, the most traveled person before the 20th century. We dropped in on the meditations of scientist, mathematician, philosopher Rene Descartes, history's wealthiest person in Mansa Musa, the charmed life of writer Kinkisi, and the brutal ending of Hypatia, the most intellectual woman ever. I also take you along, reliving my travels through 70+ countries, such as finding my way through the Sahara Desert on foot for several days alone. Another effort had me trekking through the Andes Mountains and into the high Amazon jungles of South America to a place called Lost World. Thank you to everyone, whether you have watched every video or even just one. Thank you for coming along for this journey of understanding and pursuit of knowledge. I appreciate your likes, comments, subscriptions, support, and on top of everything, your friendships. It has been an honor getting to know many of you. Potential reality, that's what the title on this channel says. What does that mean? What's the purpose, the intention of this channel? It is a combination of things. My experience, observation, research, and interest have left me with many questions. I often wonder why we have epic failures in the sense of civilizations crashing and fail to learn from it or to be concerned about it happening again. I wonder at why we accept that many live horrendous lives in tremendous suffering, and at the same time we don't make much of an effort to understand how our successes truly happen. Today, we find ourselves in a world that is faster changing than ever before, and that rate of change is growing immensely. It seems to me it is a time to more carefully question the state of things than ever before. I also look to my life as I feel we each should. We should also know one another's stories. I've been told my life has been highly unusual. If that means an intense and passionate attempt to satisfy my curiosity, then yes, this is what I have done. My travels have been through numerous civil wars, witnessing several cases of genocide, and a tremendous amount of suffering. What I have endured in those travels subjected me to an unlikely survival rate. I have wanted these experiences, not that I want them to happen, but if they existed, I wanted to understand why we allow such misery. I also realize, as much as I go through in this, it is nothing compared to the daily reality of those who I am witnessing. These videos are organized into numerous playlists. A given video may be in more than one of these. The playlists are as follows. My Travels has 19 videos, Counterculture 16, My Upbringing 13 videos, Biographies is 10, Education 9, and Whispers of the Ancients 7. One of the playlists contains summaries of sets of 10 videos, yearly trailers, previews, and milestones, such as this one. Other playlists include literature with 7 videos and music with 5. The playlist of organization, health, processes, and meditation, I have so far contributed little. So far, I have gone through many of my travels around South America. I have touched on a little of Central America, Northern Africa, the Middle East, Mongolia, the Caribbean, and Europe. There's still a lot more. I've traveled more than anyone I know through the US and have crisscrossed Canada twice. I've looked at multi-year trips that I didn't take around the Sahara, throughout the Central Asian countries, a UN-affiliated project which would have forced me to become an expert on sub-Sahara Africa, as well as being recruited by the US State Department, in which I would have spent my career abroad as a diplomat. Had I been given the choice while I was a youth to do my travels, but the consequence would be a life lived in great poverty, I wouldn't have had a choice. I still would have done my travels. Beyond my travel list, I also have individual playlists of the Cordillera Blanca, South America, Central America, and Africa. I will eventually have more. The Cordillera Blanca trip was up into the high Peruvian Andes. It was to be a couple of weeks of climbing and hiking, but turned into something much more. I witnessed a massacre, was captured by a revolutionary group, and confronted hallucinations from the altitude and mountain sickness to go along with it. Throughout numerous videos, I take a look at American society, its issues, and the counterculture movements that have occurred within. I believe my upbringing was unusual because we moved frequently. In 2 videos, I talk about having lived in the country of Panama as a small child for 2 years. I have other videos on living in the states of Indiana, Michigan, and Oregon. I've spent more than half of my life living in Southern and Northern California. I have also lived in Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, and in Arizona on a college baseball scholarship. One of my videos is on my mother's Louisiana culture, a culture that was very different than what I grew up around, but one very close to my heart, and quite an influence on me. I grew up around a great amount of violence. I believe this prepared me for my travels around the world. I saw my first murder at the age of 5. I spent 4 years living in Michigan, and while there, had to often fight gangs for survival. In Michigan, I grew up with kids from extremely poor areas and kids from wealthy areas. Some of the poor areas were brutal. The poverty and violence was extreme. I watched from afar what they went through. Many of these kids slept on cold floors, didn't even have coats for the bitter cold Michigan winter, and lived in awful housing. They were often beaten severely by their parents and by neighborhood gangs. In some of these areas, I do not know of a single kid who was not out of the public school system by 9th grade. Most had entered the prison system. This was, strangely enough, a very good school district, and many of the kids from the wealthy area would go on to Ivy League schools and places like MIT. I knew kids from the poor areas who were every bit as smart as the ones who went to schools like MIT, and some were even smarter. Some of them also had excellent leadership skills as gang leaders and charisma to go along with it. They had many of the skills to do well in life. Society missed its chance. These kids could have contributed heavily to the world. Instead, they reacted to the way they were treated, as anyone would. That is, with rage and they became monsters. It is also sad that most of us are indifferent to this and cite the problems as being inherent within those individuals. Yet, I would challenge any of you to grow up, to live in the environment I am talking about. I promise you would become the same. I certainly would. Some will say they simply were bad kids. In most of them, I saw a heart, a part of them that cared for people. I also saw this become extinguished. They then seemed to be without a soul and a heart. The only motivation then was revenge. Revenge on a world which had treated them so cruelly. I say most of them because the very worst, I think, lost their heart and soul as infants. They had already experienced unimaginable horrors even before they were able to crawl. I often talk about the extreme violence I have faced while traveling through civil wars and other violent situations. The 5 music videos I have done have been focused on early to mid-1960s. I hope you will come along for the next 100 videos as I continue to look at the potential of our world and how we are badly missing it. Thank you very much for watching, commenting, and liking. Please consider subscribing. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next episode.